I didn't plan to tell anyone this story. Honestly, I wasn't even sure it mattered. People get fired every day, right? But the way it happened, the way my boss looked at me across that glass table, like he was finally getting rid of something that had been stuck in his teeth, that stuck with me. And if you've ever had someone treat you like you were disposable, like your work didn't matter, you'll understand why I'm telling it now. Because the moment I walked out of that office, I thought I'd lost everything. I didn't know yet that he was the one who should have been scared. My name's Evan, and until a few months ago, I thought I was the kind of employee no company would ever want to lose. I wasn't brilliant, I wasn't a genius, but I was steady. I kept the place running, I solved problems quietly, cleaned up other people's messes, stayed late when deadlines collapsed, and protected my department from the fallout of upper management's strategic decisions. People like me don't get applause, but we keep the building standing. My boss, Mr. Callahan, hated that about me. Not openly. He smiled a lot, the kind of smile that doesn't move the eyes. But he hated that I didn't need him, that I didn't flinch when he raised his voice, that I understood the systems in our department better than he did. He had authority. I had competence. And competence is a dangerous thing to the wrong man. The day he fired me was warm, painfully normal. I remember the hum of the AC, the smell of someone microwaving old pasta down the hall, and the faint tapping of rain on the window. I'd just finished reviewing the quarter-end data. I knew the numbers didn't look good, but they weren't supposed to yet. We were mid-process. He'd known that. He approved the schedule. But Callahan needed someone to blame, and it might as well be the guy who never punched back. He called me into his office with a tone that pretended to be gentle. "Evan, could you step in for a minute?" I knew something was off the second I saw the HR rep sitting in the corner. She didn't look up. She was chewing her lip, eyes glued to her tablet like she was willing herself to disappear. Callahan leaned back, fake sympathies loaded in his voice. "So, we've decided to restructure the department." Restructure. One of those corporate words that sounds clean until it slices you. He went through the usual script. Performance concerns, departmental shift, new direction. It didn't even make sense. My numbers were the reason the whole section had stayed afloat the past year. But the worst part wasn't the lie. It was how much he enjoyed it. I could see it. The satisfaction. Like he'd been waiting for this moment. When he handed me the termination packet, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. Not angry. Not sad. Just tired. That's what made him uncomfortable. People like him expect tears or shouting. They expect you to crumble. But calm scares them. It means you're thinking. As I gathered my things, a few co-workers came up to me quietly. One shook my hand. Another hugged me. A few wouldn't even look in my direction. Fear does that to people. But there was one moment I keep replaying. As I walked toward the elevator, I passed the conference room. The door was slightly open. Inside, 3 board members were reviewing a stack of reports. One of them, an older man named Harrison, looked up when he saw me. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just watched. Not like Callahan did, not with contempt. His look was analytical, measuring, as if he was filing something away. I nodded to him. He nodded back, just once. It felt strange. Not quite approval. Not pity. Something else. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was too focused on leaving the building with my dignity intact. When the elevator doors closed, I finally exhaled. I felt empty and strangely relieved, like someone had cut a rope I'd been holding on to for too long. I went home early that day. I sat in my kitchen, made coffee I didn't drink, stared at the wall like it could tell me what to do next. I tried to distract myself with job searches, but my mind kept circling back, chewing on one thought. Why did Harrison look at me like that? Later that evening, I got my first clue that something wasn't normal. My personal email pinged, a message from someone at the company I barely knew. The subject line read, "Did you know they posted your job already?" Posted. Already. It had been hours, not days, And when I clicked the link, I saw the description: my role, my responsibilities, my systems, my workflows. Every bullet point was mine, and the final line at the bottom: seeking a more dynamic personality. I didn't get angry. I just sat there, letting the words sink in. More dynamic was code. It meant someone who won't question the boss, and that's exactly who they hired. His name was Rick, a loud, confident tech bro cliché with the charisma of a podcast host and the competence of a wet sock. I didn't know any of this yet, but I would, soon, because losing my job wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of Callahan's unraveling, the beginning of me realizing that the things you build quietly can outlive the people who try to bury you, the beginning of a story that would come back to him like a cold draft under a locked door. But that's still ahead. Right now, all I knew was that I'd been fired, and someone important had watched it happen. If getting fired felt like a punch, learning who replaced me felt like someone twisting the knife. His name was Rick, a guy I'd seen around the building a few times, always talking too loudly into his AirPods, always making a joke that sounded like it was aimed just a little too low. He wasn't hired for competence. He was hired because he was Callahan's type, eager to impress, easy to control, incapable of noticing the floor burning under his feet. I found out about him 2 days after my termination when a former coworker, Melissa, texted me late at night. He can't even log into the reporting system. Took him 40 minutes to find the dashboard. Callahan looks like he's dying inside. I should have laughed. I didn't. I just sat there, reading the message over and over like it was a forecast of storms, coming from a direction Callahan didn't expect. But that was just the beginning. Life outside the company wasn't glamorous. I updated my resume, hunted job boards, sent applications into the void. At first, it felt humiliating. I'd gone from being someone the department leaned on to someone refreshing email every hour, hoping for a single reply that wasn't automated. Still, I kept myself busy. I fixed a leaking pipe in my kitchen, cleaned the garage, took long walks I'd forgotten I liked. I told myself this was temporary, that I'd land on my feet. But every night, when the house got quiet, the same thought crept in. What if I'd been wrong about my value all along? Then, on a Thursday afternoon, the first ripple hit. I got an email from an unfamiliar address. Someone in compliance, a department that rarely interacted with mine while I was employed. The message was short, almost timid. Hi, Evan. Apologies for the unexpected reach-out. Can I confirm the status of a dataset you previously managed? That alone wasn't strange. What was strange came after I replied. They sent another message within 5 minutes. Then another. Questions. Missing reports. Unreconciled figures. Gaps in audit trails. Everything I'd documented. Everything I'd handed over. Everything Callahan insisted he could manage personally in my absence. Now it was a mess, and more importantly, someone was finally noticing. Meanwhile, texts from former coworkers kept trickling in like bits of gossip from a collapsing empire. Rick set off the automation sequence and crashed the inventory server. Callahan screamed at him in front of everyone. HR is suddenly asking about your old project files. Did something happen? I didn't answer those questions. I didn't have to. The pattern was obvious. Callahan had built his authority on the illusion that he controlled everything. Without someone competent under him, the illusion cracked. And Rick? Rick was gasoline. A week later, Melissa called me breathlessly. Evan, you won't believe this, she said, voice shaking between shock and amusement. Rick sent a weekly report full of placeholders. He didn't replace a single template field. It literally said insert chart here in 3 places. I pinched the bridge of my nose. And Callahan? He blamed you. Of course he did. Apparently, he told the team that my poor documentation caused the errors, that my lack of oversight created technical debt, that the department had been rotting from within long before the transition. I'd expected pettiness. I hadn't expected desperation. But the real shift happened 2 days later, late evening. I was cooking dinner when my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Almost. "Evan?" a voice said sharply. "This is Harrison, from the board." I froze. The board never called employees directly, especially not former ones. "I have a question," he continued, "about a report from Q3. He mentioned a file, one I remembered clearly because Callahan made me redo it 3 times until the numbers looked friendlier. I answered his questions carefully. Nothing emotional, nothing excessive. Just facts. When I finished, there was a long silence on his end. Then he said quietly, "That's what I thought?" My pulse spiked. "Evan, what exactly did Callahan ask you to adjust in that report?" I swallowed. A question like that wasn't innocent. It wasn't casual. It was investigative. And for the first time since being fired, I felt something shift inside me. Not joy, not relief, recognition, the sense that the ground under Callahan was beginning to crack, and he didn't even hear it yet. By the next morning, it got louder. Another coworker texted, "Why is the board scheduling an emergency review of our department?" Another emailed, "They asked me for every audit file from the last 2 years. Every file." And Melissa, always blunt, sent the message that stopped me cold. "Whatever's coming, you're involved. They're asking about your work specifically." I didn't know it yet, but that decision, answering Harrison's call, would cost them everything. That night, sitting alone in my living room with the lights off, I felt something inside me settle. Not revenge, not triumph. Something quieter, something heavier. That night, I stopped being the hero, and I started being the witness. The audit didn't arrive like a storm. Storms warn you. Clouds gather, temperature drops, air thickens. No, this came in silent, like the moment before glass breaks. No sound, just pressure, and then everything shatters at once. The first crack was subtle. A message from Melissa at 9:14 a.m. "They pulled every manager into a closed-door meeting. Callahan looks like he hasn't slept." 10 minutes later, "They asked him about numbers from your final quarter. He blamed the system." 20 minutes after that, "He blamed you." I didn't respond. I just stared at my phone, knowing exactly how that room looked. Callahan sweating through his collar, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened, eyes darting left to right, trying to measure who believed him and who didn't. But that wasn't the moment things went bad for him. That moment came at 11:32 a.m. when Harrison emailed me directly. Subject line, "Confidential, need clarification." I opened it slowly, breath held without realizing it. Inside were attachments, screenshots, reports, spreadsheets with metadata timestamps. He didn't write accusations. He didn't write opinions. He wrote a single question. "Are these the versions you submitted, or were these altered after your departure?" I clicked the first attachment, my report, my layout, my data structure. But the numbers, they weren't just different. They were surgically polished. Red turned to green. Warnings turned to resolved. Margins inflated. Losses reframed as temporary liquidity shifts. Callahan had rewritten my work, badly. And worse, he'd used my name on the export metadata. I felt something cold move down my spine, but I stayed steady. I answered carefully. Factually. No emotion, no anger, no satisfaction. When I clicked send, my hands were steady. My breathing wasn't. I didn't know exactly what this meant, but the weight of it filled the room. At 1:07 p.m., Melissa sent the next message. "Emergency all-hands meeting. Board is here. Not just Harrison. 3 of them. Is this about the missing audit logs? Everyone's panicking. Callahan just yelled at Rick in the hallway. I think he's losing it." I could almost picture it. Callahan snapping. Rick cowering. The office vibrating with silent fear the way it always had under his leadership. Only now there was no one left for him to hide behind. At 1:40 p.m., my phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Evan," the voice said, "it's Harrison." He didn't waste time. "Can you come in today?" Quietly, through the side entrance. My heartbeat thudded once, sharply. Why? I asked. His answer came low but steady. We need the truth, and you're the only one who can give it to us. I sat still for a full second, then nodded even though he couldn't see me. I'll be there in 30 minutes. When I entered the building, the receptionist looked up like she'd seen a ghost. Harrison met me in the hallway himself, something no board member does. He shook my hand once, firm. Thank you for coming, he said. Callahan doesn't know you're here. He led me into a small conference room. Not the big one, not yet. 3 other board members sat inside, laptops open, projector on. My old reports pinned side by side on the screen like evidence. Evan, one of them said, we need your help understanding the discrepancies. I didn't make speeches. I didn't preach. I walked them through the systems, the timelines, the actual numbers, the audit trails I kept backups of. Backups Callahan never knew I had. Their faces shifted in slow degrees. Confusion to concern, concern to anger, anger to something like certainty. When I finished, there was silence. Not the awkward kind, not the heavy kind, a meaningful kind, the kind people share when they realize a truth they can't ignore. Harrison closed his laptop softly. Evan, this isn't negligence. This is deliberate, and it's extensive. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He continued, the board has a responsibility to the company. We can't move forward without confronting this. He stood. Please wait here. I thought he'd be gone 5 minutes. He was gone 40. 40 minutes in which I sat alone, hands folded, listening to my own pulse in my ears. 40 minutes knowing that right now something irreversible was happening a few rooms away. At 3:12 p.m., distant shouting echoed down the hall. Callahan. Even muffled, I recognized the pitch. Panic sharpened into anger. A door slammed. Voices rose. Someone yelled, "You can't be serious." Someone else replied, calm but brutal, "We've seen enough." Then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. A few minutes later, Harrison returned. His expression was unreadable, careful, composed. "Evan," he said, "they want you in the main conference room." My stomach dropped. Main conference room wasn't a meeting. Main conference room was judgment. When I stepped inside, everyone was already there. Executives, directors, even a few senior staff members sitting near the wall, like they'd been summoned but didn't know why. And at the center of it all stood Callahan, red-faced, shaking, eyes locked on me the moment I entered. "You!" he spat. I stayed silent. Harrison raised a hand. "That's enough." Callahan looked around the room, breathing hard, realizing, too late, that for the first time in years, the room wasn't his. He opened his mouth to speak again, but Harrison spoke first, and what he said made Callahan go pale in a way I will remember for the rest of my life. But that moment belongs to the next part, because everything Callahan feared was about to land on him at once, and he didn't even see the biggest blow coming. Callahan stood in the center of the conference room like a man waiting for a verdict he still believed he could talk his way out of. His tie was crooked, his collar damp with sweat, and his eyes flicked from face to face, searching for one person, anyone, who would save him. No one did. Harrison didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He didn't need to. He just looked at Callahan with the calm authority of someone who had already made a decision. "Your department's numbers were falsified," he said, repeatedly, consistently, and in a manner that benefited only you. Callahan shook his head violently. That's not true. Evan, Harrison didn't let him finish. "We spoke to Evan. We reviewed the backups, the metadata, the documents you edited under his name." He clicked a remote. A projection filled the wall. The altered files, the timestamps, the discrepancies. Callahan flinched at each one like they were blows. "You cannot possibly believe," Callahan stammered, "that he is more credible than—" He didn't doctor the numbers. Harrison's tone sliced clean. "You did. The room was silent except for Callahan's breathing, shallow, uneven. And then Harrison said the sentence that finished him. And for the record, Evan has already been reinstated. Not in his old position. Above it. A ripple went through the room, a collective shift of attention toward me. Not pity, not sympathy. Respect. Callahan stared at me, frozen. Confusion crashed into shock. Shock into betrayal. And then into the purest fear I've ever seen on a grown man's face. "What?" he whispered. No, that's impossible. I fired him. I made that call. Harrison's expression didn't change. "You fired someone the company needed. Now the company no longer needs you." For a second, Callahan didn't move. His brain simply refused to process the words. Then he lunged forward, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You set me up," he hissed. "You did this." I met his eyes. I didn't lie on any reports. That was all. That was enough. Security appeared at the doorway. Quiet, calm, professional. The way they approached someone who wasn't dangerous, just done. Callahan tried to protest, but the words died in his throat as they guided him toward the exit. There was no yelling, no fight, just a man realizing too late that the power he'd wrapped himself in was made of paper. As he disappeared down the hallway, the room stayed silent. No applause, no celebration, just closure. Harrison turned back to me. "We'd like you to lead the restructure of your former department," he said. "You have the skill, and more importantly, the integrity." I nodded once. It wasn't triumph. It was gravity. Later, when the board dismissed everyone, I walked out of the conference room with slow steps, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. The building looked the same, but it felt different, like someone had finally lifted a pressure I didn't know was crushing me until it was gone. Outside, the air was cool, clear. I stood there for a moment under the afternoon sky, letting the quiet sink into my bones. A text buzzed on my phone. "Melissa, he's gone. For real. Rick quit an hour ago. No goodbye." Another message followed. "Is it true? You're coming back?" I typed back, "Yes, but not the way I left." When I got home that evening, I didn't turn on the lights right away. I just sat on the sofa, shoes still on, hands resting on my knees. For the first time in months, I felt steady. Not relieved, steadier than that. A kind of clean peace that comes from knowing the world didn't fall apart when someone tried to push you out of it. Some people think justice looks like fireworks, but sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a single sentence said in a conference room that makes the right person go pale. And sometimes justice is just getting your key card back and walking through the front door with your head up, knowing you didn't have to destroy anyone to win. They destroyed themselves. As for me, I start next Monday. New title, new office, new authority to make sure no one else gets buried the way I nearly did. I'm not going back to be the hero. I'm going back to build something better. And this time, nobody's taking that away from me.